Hi everyone, and welcome to another in our series of video chats. Now today we're going to be talking about protecting elephants, and I'm joined by two scientists from Exeter Centre for Research in Animal Behaviour. Connie Allen is a PhD student who's been researching the complexities of male African elephant society in Botswana in order to help support conservation efforts there. And Lauren Brent is an associate professor in ethology at Exeter who studies the evolution of sociality, which is why social relationships are formed and how they are maintained. So welcome both of you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Emma.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just start asking what inspired your love of elephants specifically?
So for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to study wild animal behaviour. It wasn't really until my bachelor's degree that this came to be an interest in sociality, particular and social animals and animals that have a high degree of social complexity. And of course, up there with the primates and the dolphins and whales, elephants were really this peak in social complexity and social intelligence. This is what really drew me to elephants. They're just really a fascinating study species for understanding complexity of social systems. You know, they have this incredible long-term memory, and they clearly live extremely rich and complex, perhaps even emotional social lives. And it just makes them a really ideal study species for understanding complex social phenomena, like how do animals associate and who do they associate with over long lifespans? How do animals learn, and does it matter who you learn from? How does the social environment influence you in the short and the long term? And these are, all parts of our own sociality that fascinate us. And to have the potential to study this in another species that is so distantly related to us, it's a really fascinating opportunity for me.
And I get to live vicariously through Connie's study of elephants because she's the real expert here. But very same, I'm interested in social behavior, its foundations, what that means for our incredibly socially complex lives as humans. And elephants tick a lot of those boxes, as Connie mentioned, do some of the other critters that I study, which include non-human primates, some of the cetaceans. So really like large mammals that live in incredibly rich, complex social lives are fascinating. And yeah, that's when we ended up here.
Awesome. Now this is going to sound a very stupid question, but why is it so vital to protect the elephants?
Protecting elephants, I'd say, it's a delicate balance, because we have this unfortunate situation where we have some areas that are really struggling with a rife poaching problem, habitat loss, and dwindling populations of elephants. And we have other areas where people argue perhaps we have too many elephants and they're becoming their sort of own worst enemy, and that they're coming into conflicts with people more and more. However, a healthy elephant population is really important in the habitats in which they naturally roam. They're what we call ecosystem engineers, in that the interactions they have with the environment are on such a large scale that they are really large modifiers of the habitats in which they live, and they control larger tree numbers and protect and may allow a habitat for a smaller species, and so on, the species fall below them. So in protecting elephants, you're also protecting this huge umbrella of an ecosystem underneath them. Also, I'd say concerning for people, elephants are a huge source of income concerning tourism. They're, alongside lions, elephants are the main species that people come to see for wildlife tourism. So they're a huge source of income and provider of jobs. And also, I'd just say, for me, elephants are really the icon of the struggles of wildlife conservation as a whole, and the place of wild animals in the modern world. And it feels, if we can't save even the world's largest mammal, that we have so much respect and sympathy for, then what hope is there really for the smaller, lesser known species and that are also facing extinction risk?
Yeah, wow. And if I can ask you a little bit about your research specifically that you're doing at the moment, what did you initially set out to try and achieve?
So I was working in a bull area, which means the only elephants in the area were males. It was 98% male population. And this provided a really unique opportunity to understand male sociality, because at the moment we overwhelmingly understand a lot more about female what goes on in their social lives and their social structure and such. And for elephants, this is a particular concern because it's actually the males that are overwhelmingly involved in human-wildlife conflict. So it's more important than ever to understand their social requirements, the influences on their social behavior and such, to better inform elephant conservation and management strategies.
Brilliant, thank you. And what have you guys been able to learn about the way that elephants live and the way their social structures are set up?
The main highlight has been seeing the connections that are going on between males of different ages in the male society. Male elephants, they leave their natal herd and their mothers, aunts, sisters and such between the ages of 10 and 20, and they have to establish themselves in this separate male elephant society. And being this long-lived species that can live to sort of over 50 years, there's this huge diversity of ages that present themselves in male bull areas, from newly independent adolescents all the way to these highly experienced, highly knowledgeable adult bulls. And a major focus has been asking the question of how do male elephants use the social environment to improve their decision-making and their efficiency in learning about the environment and the resources within it. So first of all, you could do this by targeting particular individuals. So we did this through focusing on the importance of older bulls in society. And you can also do this through using clues in the environment and public social information. So we looked at how elephants take clues from the environment through our project on the pathways, which maybe we talk a little bit more in detail, and how they use these pathways in the environment as sort of indicators of the movements of other elephants in the area.
That's great. I mean, you mentioned that, and I have seen a bit of that research that was published recently. Can you tell us a bit more about what you found about how elephants find their way around?
So yeah, it was a pathway study that we put camera traps on pathways to monitor. Usually you just use photo on camera traps, but we actually used little film, so you could actually get the behavior of the elephant as he passed the camera. And we found that to particular random spots randomly assigned in each trial, elephants were overwhelmingly paying olfactory attention to it, so sniffing and tracking the pathway. And even more so when they were on their own. So this indicates sort of elephants are using olfactory, perhaps urine and dung scents that have been deposited over the years as elephants continue to use the pathway, as sort of an indicator of the movements of other elephants in the area. And the fact that even more so lone travelers are doing this suggests that even if you have no companions to rely on, you're even more likely to be using this public social information for navigation.
Brilliant. So what could you do with that information? How does that help with conserving elephant populations, do you think?
I think we see such huge potential with using this information for managing elephant populations, in that, first of all, concerning coming into conflict with humans. Conflict is way more likely in areas close to pathways. So if we can use, if they are kind of following this scent trail, if you like, if we can modify and change the pathway route for elephants to go in a different direction to perhaps avoid conflict with humans altogether, this would be one use. And secondly, as I said earlier, some areas are struggling with too many elephants, and we have these really fragmented populations and areas that used to have elephants but now have no longer elephants. And if we could use these pathways to sort of improve the efficiency of corridors and make elephants think this is a good place to travel, because naturally in the environment, these pathways are connecting crucial resources like water or treated like particular areas of forage. And if we can trick elephants into thinking, oh, I need to follow this pathway because elephants have clearly been going this way, then this could be perhaps a useful tool for connecting fragmented habitats.
Brilliant. Now, Lauren, we've been talking about elephants for a while, but I was just curious to know, how useful this information is when you're thinking about other species and other environments around the world.
It's incredibly useful. So from more of a fundamental standpoint, Connie's work slots into what's kind of a now growing body of research on the importance of older individuals and the ecological and social knowledge that they've accrued by being old, right? They've had more experiences. They've lived in their social and ecological environments for longer than younger individuals, and the roles that they're playing for many decades. 40 years ago, if you were to ask someone who studied animal behavior or psychology or biology about animals living in groups, they would have told you that all individuals are the same. They're effectively indistinct, atoms bumping into each other. We've known for quite a while that that's not true, but the extent to which it's not true and just the level of layers and complexity to these social networks that species other than ourselves form, we're shedding more and more light on that every day. And one of the things that's begun to gain a lot of interest in recent years through Connie's work and others' work is the factor of age, right? And how older individuals might play particular roles in their environments, how they might either passively or actively share information with others who live with them. And that has consequences, pure science consequences, simply for our understanding of individual differences and our own roles in society and how those might change as our attributes change. But also, as Connie points out, there are real conservation, wildlife management implications in some populations. So this is true whether you're an elephant, whether you're a menopausal killer whale. We need to preserve the environments that those animals live in. We need to manage sometimes the resources that they access. And part of that focus needs to be on the demographic composition, right? So if there's an opportunity to protect certain individuals over others, if you have to make that choice, in some instances, you might take the choice, well, the older individuals have higher social value for their society, right? Not necessarily for us, but for their society. And so special attention might need to be paid to their preservation, to their continuation for the good of the entire population and conservation. So it touches on all sorts of boxes, really. It's incredibly important as a story for elephants and African wildlife management, but it really has broader implications and speaks to sort of where really active, really vital research in animal behavior is going. It's kind of really a forefront kind of question that people are asking.
Brilliant, thank you very much. You both mentioned conservation management, and I was just wondering, if you had any examples of how poor decisions that have been taken in the past have impacted both elephants, but potentially other animals as well, where people maybe thought they were doing a good thing, but actually they weren't. Now, with what you know now.
Time and time again, studies are showing that how disruptive management of elephant populations can be, because they're so complex and connected to each other in ways that we're only really beginning to fully appreciate. Small mistakes can have very wide-reaching consequences, and of course they also have long-term memories, and so negative experiences even early on in life can lead to destructive behavior for many, many years. The main example that comes to mind was also a major inspiration behind my research, which was in Pilanesberg National Park in Southern Africa. It also links to what Lauren says, where it's not enough just to have a species. The age demographic is so important, because in this park they introduced male elephants, thinking they were trying to reestablish the population, but they were all young males and adolescent males. And this, without the older males in the society, they found that these elephants were hyper-aggressive. They were killing rhinos, even flipping human vehicles and such, and a real danger to the environment. And when they introduced these older males, subsequent to this, pretty much overnight, this behavior stopped. And this really highlights the role of these older males. And as part of my research, I also did a study looking at this influence of older males on aggression. And I similarly found an effect even in the short-term presence. So the elephants in my study area weren't permanently isolated from mature males, Even just in the short-term absence of males, I was seeing this increase. Sorry, even the short-term absence of older bulls, I was seeing this increase in aggressive behaviors. And yeah, this really highlights it's not just as simple just to have the animals, it's also getting the right demographic, and particularly things like age. Perhaps the older bulls we suggest are sort of policing negative behavior and controlling behaviors that are disruptive to the society, these unnecessary aggressive behaviors. Or perhaps the younger males genuinely feel at higher risk when there's less mature individuals in the population, and they're more responsive to what they perceive as threats, for example.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lauren, you mentioned killer whales a minute ago. I was just wondering if there was any kind of overlap there in terms of, you know, things that have happened in the past, decisions that have been taken that actually now you know are not the best way of doing things.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a killer whale example. It's a bit more indirect what happens to the killer whales in this day, because most of, well, they have a lot of threats. One of their main threats in the Pacific Northwest, anyway. I should specify that my experiences with a particular population of killer whales. So in the Pacific Northwest of North America, fisheries decisions impact them because there's a population that are salmon eating specialists, and humans also like to eat salmon, and so decisions about damming rivers, catches can have really severe knock-on effects on the killer whale population, and of course decisions about shipping lanes and you know, noise pollution and what have you also can have pretty direct knock-on effects to the killer whale populations. But the elephants, really, it's a much clearer kind of link with those individual differences that I was talking to before, because decisions are often made based on the size and therefore the age of the individual, whereas in something aquatic that's not taken out of the environment by humans anymore, because they're listed as critically endangered amongst other reasons, then that's a bit less of an issue. But I think it does, even though I don't have a great example for you from the killer whales, and I've also been thinking about some of the non-human primate populations with which I'm quite familiar from my own research. I think the message still stands that these are highly social societies, right? These animals live in really complex societies, about which we know quite a lot, but at the same time, we're still scratching the surface of understanding those societies, just as there's a lot we don't understand about our own society. There's plenty we don't understand about a lot of charismatic megafauna, but as Connie mentioned too, there are lots of highly social mammals and other types of animals out there that we know very little about, including the basic question, to what extent are they social? So, and a lot of those societies are endangered too. So the message overall stands that we need to better understand. It's incredibly important for their preservation, for our ability, if we're intervening in terms of wildlife management, to do so successfully, to understand actually how the social systems, so not just the ecology, where do they move, what are they eating, type of questions. We also need to understand questions about the societies themselves, so that we're not taking decisions that can have really severe knock-on effects, like removing or not providing old individuals if we're creating a new population. In some species, that's going to matter greatly. Just like, if you're a species like the elephant where males and females live separately, if you were suddenly to try and force them all together, if you didn't have that understanding of how they structure their social lives, it would go very badly. And that's a very basic example. And now we're talking about slightly more nuanced, more complex examples. But without that knowledge, then you're absolutely going to make mistakes. So it really speaks to both the need for conservation, wildlife management, focused research, but also the need for basic science when it comes to understanding how other species organize their social systems, because only with that information can you then successfully develop those wildlife management and conservation strategies.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'd just like to sort of finish up by asking you about what's next for your research. Connie, what's the next kind of step that you're taking?
I think my main takeaway from the research so far has been this interest to further pursue this focus on social learning in African elephants, especially for me in dispersing adolescent males, because compared to females who stay in their herd, males are really thrust into this environment to somehow learn about how to become this hugely intelligent, knowledgeable, and highly functional animal and that navigates in such a huge landscape. So I really want to focus a bit more on the adolescent dispersal phase and how naive individuals go about learning about being successful male and how to navigate their environment. This may be through tracking of individuals through the dispersal phase, or how they mimic or copy older males, and how much is actually learned just by trial and error, perhaps. And secondly, concerning the pathway olfaction work, there's kind of two main focuses, I guess, for my research. And concerning the pathway work, I think it's really worth trying to pursue experimenting whether elephant pathways can be created or modified to assist in elephant management. And maybe first of all, we need to identify if there are key chemical components to the pathways that are key stimulus that the elephants are following. And then we can try out, even on a small scale, we could try out first manipulating pathways to see if you can encourage elephants to follow a particular route. And then we can slowly build this up to the scale of perhaps wildlife corridors one day and reconnecting elephant populations.
Brilliant. Thank you. A final question for both of you, which just links to that. It's going to overlap a little, I think, but what would you really like to achieve with the wider research into all these social groups? It's quite a vague question, I'm afraid there. Just thinking about the future, what would you really like to achieve?
For me, I guess I ultimately want to just continue to contribute, as Lauren said, to kind of bridge the gap between animal behavior, social behavior research and conservation management research. There's an unfortunate kind of broken link between them, and it would be great to kind of help. They're both as important as each other, and they're both dependent on each other. So to continue to contribute to this field would be my ultimate goal.
And for me, ultimately, to continue to shed light on the social networks, the societies of other animals, how they're structured, why they're structured in that way, and the consequences that has for the individuals in them, and occasionally the consequences that has for human-related issues. But yeah, to fundamentally better understand societies, basically.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. It's really interesting. I personally love elephants, so it's really interesting to hear from somebody that
who doesn't love elephants.
Working with them. I know, if you don't like elephants, that's just not right, is it?
No.
So thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing a bit more.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you very much.